do you think the will of the people was important to the election outcome? In other words, do you think that we just experienced something like democracy? If a senator gets suspended for something he said on Twitter, Twitter needs to explain that to us, right? That's not just between Twitter and that one senator or other elected official. It's not just between them. Like, we're part of this fight, right? Like, if you suspend somebody I voted for, you're fucking with me. For all practical purposes, this was the year we formed a Chinese form of government. Our government is now clearly, I mean, this survey shows it as clearly as possible, that the decision of who is president has been taken out of the hands of the public. That statement is very strong. Let me say it again. These social media companies and the heads of the big networks have taken out of the hands of the public the decision of who their government will be. People still believe that they look at the information and form relevant opinions. That is one of the big reality-bending things that you're going to learn. That you don't look at data and form opinions. It doesn't happen. It is purely an illusion. You look at the data that the oligarchs show you, and you don't see anything else, and then you form the opinion that they wanted you to form, which they created by deciding what information you see. You are not part of the decision-making process, even for your own brain. I promised you, a couple weeks ago, that your understanding of reality was about to change because of this election situation. I would argue that it has, but I saw some critics pushing back, saying it hadn't because it looks like Biden's going to take the job. But let me fill this idea out a little bit, all right? Do you think the will of the people was important to the election outcome? In other words, do you think that we just experienced something like democracy? Do you think that people looked at the information, made decisions, voted, we counted the votes, we picked a winner? Is that what happened? Because here's what I saw. I saw, first of all, that social media has been brainwashing the public for years. So I saw social media brainwashing that's very, very effective because they're good at it. So where does brainwashing come in from social media with your free will? It's the opposite. All right? What about the fake news? How does your free will work if the facts you're working on are all fake? Do you have free will if nothing you know is true? It kind of makes free will a ridiculous concept. The will of the people? Let me give you a specific example that's just mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. So last night on the show The Five on Fox News, Richard Fowler was the sitting in for the person representing the left, sitting in for Juan Williams, I believe, and he claimed on television, in public, that he personally believed that the President of the United States had once recommended drinking bleach. He thinks that happened. Now, all the other members of the Five literally yelled at him when he said that, in unison. That didn't happen, because it didn't happen. The president never used the word bleach, never used the word drinking. He talked about injecting disinfectants in the concept of light as a disinfectant. You can put it on a ventilator, stick it in the lungs, and there was a trial that was being ready to look into see if that could work. So the president said he was just joking, but which I don't buy that one. But in either case, it is easy to confirm he definitely didn't say drink bleach. And Richard Fowler, and I'm sure he was not lying, He looked completely honest when he was saying this, and I believe it because I don't think I don't think he would lie about it. He believed he actually saw it. He didn't believe he heard about it. He believed he witnessed it. Think about this. Now, Richard Fowler is not just a voter. This is somebody whose job is talking about presidential politics every day. He's a professional. Richard Fowler would be, I would guess, my cat's doing a walk by here, I would guess that Richard Fowler would be in the top 1% of well-informed people in this country. Would you agree with me? Somebody who does it for a job. Yeah, and they're so good at it that they're on TV, they're on radio shows, podcasts, whatever. Richard Fowler is a high-end, super well-informed political person. He thought he witnessed the president telling the country to drink bleach or suggesting it. And it never happened. But the fake news said it happened so many times that he has a false memory of it. I mean, to watch this happen is amazing, to see it happen in real time. So you got your fake news, you got your the changes in the mail-in ballots. Probably that alone changed the election. If we know that Republicans like to vote in person, we know that Democrats and low-motivated people might send in a ballot. We know there's more possibility of mischief. So probably the thing that affected the election was whatever social media brainwashed you for, whatever the fake news created as your reality, the mail-in ballots, which is a process change, which probably changed the outcome. Just the fact that there was a coronavirus and they had to do mail-in ballots probably could change the outcome. And then what about the fraud? We'll talk about that in a minute. So how much of what I just mentioned, that's my cat talking to you, how much of what I just mentioned is the people's will? None of it. It's the opposite of the people's will. Nothing like democracy happened. There was nothing like democracy that just happened in the United States. But we probably will get over it. We probably will get past it without a civil war, which is a credit to the country, I think. So Twitter suspended Pennsylvania Senator and Colonel Doug Mastriano, because he was leading the Pennsylvania Senate hearings. I don't know what he tweeted, but he got suspended for, 12 hours or something. He's back now. And I would just add this to that story. If Twitter suspends you, they owe you a reason, don't you think? Don't you think they owe you a reason? Because you would like to know. It's not a law. There's no constitutional right that Twitter will tell you why they're suspending you. But it seems good form. They should say, oh, you promoted violence or you said something that wasn't true too many times. Something like that. But on top of that, if an elected official gets suspended from Twitter, Twitter's obligation, again, not legal, not constitutional obligation, but I think an obligation of, members of society. Let's say a social obligation, a civilization obligation. If a senator gets suspended for something he said on Twitter, Twitter needs to explain that to us, right? That's not just between Twitter and that one senator or other elected official. It's not just between them. Like, we're part of this fight, right? Like, if you suspend somebody I voted for, you're fucking with me, right? You owe me an explanation. I didn't see one. So this would be my recommendation to Jack and to Twitter, is that, I don't think that there are no reasons to suspend people. And I feel that they're experimenting their way to maybe a better situation. So as long as they're A/B testing, I'm not going to be too hard on Twitter. They're testing stuff, they're seeing what the response is, they're seeing what works. So some of that's fine. But you need to explain to the public, if you're banning somebody we voted for, That's on us, right? That's personal. I'm not even I'm not even a citizen of Pennsylvania, right? I didn't vote for this senator, but it's still personal because this is a senator that, one of my country's states elected. They elected him to speak for them, and Twitter decided that he couldn't. Why does Twitter decide that a legally elected senator, at least in this one limited way, can't speak for us? Can't speak for the people. All right, enough on that. The Daily Wire and Hank Berrien did a story about, apparently there was a study to find out how much Biden supporters know about the news. It went just about the way you think it would go. Turns out that a survey of 1,750 Biden supporters in 7 swing states, so they're looking at the swing states, that's what mattered, found that the news media's suppression of stories, now that part is opinion. I know you agree with the opinion, as do I, but that's opinion, have hurt former Vice President Joe Biden's electoral chances. So they go on to talk about the stories that Democrats didn't hear. I'm not talking about they disagree with the stories. They didn't hear them. Complete blackout. All right, so listen to this. 82% of Biden voters were unaware of at least one of the following issues. The Tara Reade sexual assault allegations, 35% were unaware. So think about that. 35% of the people who voted for Biden probably thought they didn't want to support the guy who was an accused sexual molester, so they voted for Biden instead. But 35% of them had never heard that he's an accused rapist. I feel sorry for the Democrats. And 8.9% said they would have voted for Trump if they had known about that. These numbers are so big, they would completely change the election if the news had allowed, and social media, had allowed people to know about these stories. The Hunter Biden scandal. 45% of voters, Biden voters, were unaware. 45% of Biden voters had never heard the Hunter Biden scandal. That is so bad, it's just funny. I really feel sorry for these people. And 9.4% said they would have switched their vote. All right, 25% didn't know Kamala Harris is really, really left. Come on, how do you not know that? Now, some of it is just people don't watch the news, but these are probably a lot of them are people who did watch the news and still didn't know the news. Let's see. How many knew there was a huge jump in economic growth? So how many people knew that we're coming out of the pandemic, at least the economic part, really strongly? 49% of Democrats didn't know about that. They didn't know. How do you not know about the economy? I mean, how do you not pay attention to that? And 5.6% said they would have changed their vote if they knew about that. How about the historic peace agreements with Israel and their Arab neighbors? Now, you can't miss that, right? It's like what probably one of the biggest stories of the year is that the Middle East is finding peace and that Trump is a big part of that with Jared Kushner. And how many people in the Democrats, how many do you think hadn't heard about that? Let's see, I lost that number. It's a big number. All right. So they hadn't heard that. 43%, almost 44%, had never heard about any of the Middle East peace deals. 44%. Oh my God. Poor Democrats. How about a number of Democrats who were aware the president was behind Operation Warp Speed and that it's a huge success? How many didn't know that who voted for Biden? 36%. 36%. All right. Now, of course, some of these people might not have necessarily voted for Trump, but they might have not voted. If you could have gotten 6% of them to not vote, that would have been a pretty big deal. Now here's the kicker on this. Because we're spending all our attention talking about fraud or no fraud, the social media and the news is getting a pass. There's nothing like the will of the people or democracy that happened. So this vote wasn't even close to a democratic process within the context of a republic. Well, not even close. The only thing that happened, and you can see it really clearly in this survey, what happened is the public was brainwashed by social media and the news. And that's it. Every other part of the story is way less important. Is the fraud important? Well, it's important for fixing the elections in the future, perhaps. But even the fraud is smaller than what the social media and the fake news did for the past year. Way smaller. So because the fraud is the fun, glowing object, and it's the thing we're watching, and we're sort of bored about talking about media bias, they got a total pass. For all practical purposes, this was the year we formed a Chinese form of government. The Chinese form of government is you've got your supreme leader, your President Xi, but really he has to be backed by the Communist Party top officials. If President Xi lost the support, hypothetically, of all of the top officials in the Communist Party, he probably would lose power. So the president, even though he's sort of dictator-like, he's not really, because he kind of has to have that lower level agreeing with him. Similar to Iran. Iran has a process where there's the supreme leader, but he's a supreme leader, but he needs his religious council to support him, or he probably couldn't stay in power. What we have just created accidentally is a process by which the social media CEOs, given that they control what happens in their companies, that they have become effectively like the Communist Party of China. Now, this is an analogy, all right? So don't get too hung up in, hey, they're not exact. There's a slight difference. They're not exact, right? I'm just making the point that our government is now clearly, this survey shows it as clearly as possible, that the decision of who is president has been taken out of the hands of the public. That statement is very strong. Let me say it again. The social media companies and the heads of the big networks have taken out of the hands of the public the decision of who their government will be. That happened. There's no story that's bigger than that. Do you know why that's not a story? Because we're a communist country now. and the Communist Party, and again, I'm taking the analogy too far, but the heads of the social media platforms and the heads of the news networks, they get to decide who's president. If you don't think that's true, well, I got a survey to show you, because it was just shown pretty conclusively. If the news can simply disappear stories, and you can see that very clearly they did, they get to decide who's president. It's not you. It's not you at all. You're not even a little bit involved in picking the president. Not even. You are simply being assigned an opinion, and then like a good little hypnotized zombie, you go, I have my opinion. I'm using my good judgment, my free will. I will go vote now according to my smart thinking and free will. And none of that happened. The public is assigned their opinions, and then that's it. That's the process. You wait for the oligarchs to tell you what your opinion will be. They assign it. It doesn't affect everybody. Granted, maybe you are invulnerable. Maybe their brainwashing doesn't work on you. But it works enough on enough people that your vote is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if it works on you. So people still believe that they look at the information and form relevant opinions. That is one of the big reality-bending things that you're going to learn. That you don't look at data and form opinions. It doesn't happen. It is purely an illusion. You look at the data that the oligarchs show you, and you don't see anything else, and then you form the opinion that they wanted you to form, which they created by deciding what information you see. You are not part of the decision-making process, even for your own brain. That has now gone. Right? Again, there are exceptions, right? They don't necessarily brainwash every person the same way and just as effectively. But that's what's happening. That's the world you live in now. There was another study that showed that the tone of the COVID-related news articles in the United States, 91% of them were negative. Now you say to yourself, doesn't that make sense? It's a pandemic. Shouldn't 91% of the coverage, if not 100%, be leaning a little negative? We're sort of in the middle of a pandemic. Except that if you look at how media outside the United States treats it, 54% give it a negative coverage. So I suppose you could argue that maybe we got hit worse in the United States. Maybe that's part of it. But it feels as though that was a Trump-related problem a little bit, right? That our oligarchs decided that COVID was going to be the story and it was bad for Trump, and there you have it. All right. But part of that study said that it didn't matter if things were trending worse or better with the pandemic. It didn't affect the coverage being 91% negative. So the allegation in this study was that the news creates a narrative that is invulnerable to any change in facts. How do we get rid of propaganda and back to truth? I would argue that we've never been at truth. We just didn't know it. So when I talked about Trump changing the nature of reality, what people thought they are seeing is that he changed the reality. Now, he did change the reality. But on top of that, he also changed how we see the reality that was already there. Before Trump, you probably thought your elections were pretty secure. You probably thought your social media was a little biased, but how big a deal is that? Maybe you thought that your news was real. Trump taught you that your observation of reality is deeply subjective and you're probably getting brainwashed. That wasn't new. It was only new to you. It wasn't something that I didn't know. And in 2015, when I said, I think it was 2015, when I said that Trump would change your understanding of reality, it was this. This is the part I was telling you was coming. I could see it as clearly as I could see, my hand in front of my face. You could tell that he was going to mess up what you thought of your own ability to understand your reality in a way that could never be put back in the bottle. And the biggest way he did it was by departing from the fact-checking all the time. Because he realized that the facts are not persuasive, and we don't live in a world where facts matter, at least, matter for persuasion. They matter for reality, but not persuasion. I think the president, when people are trying to understand, why does he keep saying things that aren't true when he must have figured out by now they're not true. Somebody has told him it's not true. And I would say that the big reality mind effort that some of you are already at and some of you are almost there is this. He might know that it doesn't matter. And indeed, he was right. He became president without paying any attention to the specificity of the fact-checking. None. He treated it like it literally didn't matter at all. And what happened? He was right. He was 100% right. None of the fact-checking mattered. None of it. What did matter is how the networks covered it and social media handled it, etc. But it didn't matter if it was true, and it didn't matter if it wasn't true, so long as it was well intended to move the country in a good direction. That's what mattered.